South Africa was plunged into an extraordinary state of shock on Friday evening after the High Court delivered a dramatic and historic ruling that directly placed President Cyril Ramaphosa in its crosshairs, warning that he could face imprisonment should he refuse to step down voluntarily. The decision, announced late in the day, sent immediate shockwaves across the country and tore through the African National Congress, ANC, triggering turmoil within the ruling party. Sources report that several ANC members were visibly overwhelmed, with some reduced to tears, as the possibility of an era-ending moment suddenly became real. Before we continue, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. The legal action against President Ramaphosa follows months of intense investigations into allegations that he violated national laws, including claims involving the misuse of state resources and other alleged abuses of office. In a statement issued from the presidency, officials stressed that no individual, regardless of rank or position, stands above the law. The office of the president is not immune from prosecution, the statement read, underscoring the seriousness of the court's directive. It further clarified that failure by President Ramaphosa to comply with the order would carry severe consequences, including the possibility of imprisonment. The ruling has shaken the very core of the ANC, with internal sources revealing that the party experienced deep shock during a parliamentary session that stretched late into Friday night. Reports indicate that opposition researcher May compiled an extensive dossier outlining allegations against President Ramaphosa, citing multiple breaches of constitutional law and other alleged offences. Addressing the nation, May pointed to the stark contrast between Ramaphosa's promises when he first assumed office and what critics now describe as a period of decline under his leadership. "We have worked very hard to build this nation since 1994, May said. Ramaphosa took office promising to reform a failing state. Now he represents the very definition of its decay." May further argued that South Africa, founded on the principles of freedom, justice, equality, and democracy, is being undermined by politicized law enforcement, entrenched corruption, and the capture of key state institutions. At the same time, he attempted to temper the impact of the court ruling by suggesting that President Ramaphosa could still preserve his dignity if he chose to resign willingly. The parliamentary response to the judgment was highly charged, with many lawmakers visibly shaken as proceedings continued deep into the night. The moment the ruling was announced, opposition parties erupted into applause, hailing what they described as a historic victory for accountability and the rule of law. ANC members, by contrast, appeared stunned, struggling to absorb the full implications of the court's decision. Julius Malema, leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, seized the moment, addressing Parliament with remarks that echoed much of the public mood. "This is exactly what we have been saying all along. The president is not above the law. Justice has finally caught up with him. He must face the consequences like any other citizen," Malema declared, framing the ruling as a long overdue affirmation of legal equality. At the same time, John Steenhuisen, leader of the Democratic Alliance, DA, called for President Ramaphosa's immediate resignation, describing the court order as a victory for both democracy and constitutional governance. "If a president truly believes in the constitution they claim to uphold, they must step down immediately," Steenhuisen said during an impromptu press briefing, emphasizing the urgency of compliance with the law. Legal experts and constitutional scholars have widely described the ruling as a landmark moment in South Africa's democratic history. Legal practitioner Den Dion Kosi explained that this marks the first time a sitting head of state has been directly threatened with imprisonment for failing to obey a court order. He noted that the judgment could have far-reaching consequences for governance, setting a powerful precedent for accountability at the highest levels of political office. Public reaction has been intense, particularly in Pretoria, where large crowds gathered outside the union buildings, holding placards demanding that the president step down. Slogans such as "No one is above the law" and "Step down now" filled the air. On social media, citizens in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban echoed the unrest, using hashtags like #Ramaphosa Step Down and #AN Crisis, reflecting a deeply divided national mood. While some citizens expressed cautious support for President Ramaphosa, others insisted that compliance with the court order was non-negotiable, highlighting the complex legal, political, and social tensions driving the crisis. Analysts have warned that either the president's resignation or any attempt to defy the ruling could further destabilize an already fragile economy. One citizen, speaking emotionally, expressed hope that some of Ramaphosa's earlier initiatives might survive the turmoil. Yet a prevailing sense of foreboding remains, with commentators noting that the situation represents a sharp break from political norms, pushing South Africa into uncharted constitutional territory. Reliable sources indicate that President Ramaphosa now has fewer than 7 working days to comply with the court's directive. Failure to do so would amount to criminal contempt, potentially triggering action by law enforcement or the National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, a scenario without precedent in South Africa's democratic era. Reports suggest that the president's inner circle is operating under intense pressure to craft a public response, as speculation swirls around his next move. Some sources claim Ramaphosa feels betrayed and cornered by the judicial intervention, while others suggest he is determined to challenge the ruling in the Constitutional Court. This uncertainty has intensified divisions within the ANC, particularly among younger members, often referred to as the party's Young Turks, who are calling for a new era of accountability and governance reform. These internal fractures are reportedly nearing a tipping point, raising fears of a potential split within the ruling party. Supporters of President Ramaphosa argue that the court order is politically motivated, intended to weaken his leadership and undermine public confidence in his administration. This internal tug-of-war has deepened the sense of instability, leaving both the ANC and the country at a critical crossroads. The court's directive has not only targeted the presidency itself but has also exposed deep fissures within South Africa's political culture and governance structures. For the nation as a whole, these unfolding events represent a severe test of democratic institutions, legal authority, and the balance of power between branches of government. Citizens, political analysts, and international observers are watching closely to see whether President Ramaphosa will step aside to preserve his legacy or whether the country will be drawn into a confrontation that could fundamentally reshape its political landscape. As South Africa moves into an uncertain future, the questions remain unresolved. Will President Ramaphosa comply with the court order and avoid legal consequences? Will the ANC unite to preserve party cohesion, or will internal divisions tear it apart? Could this crisis ultimately mark a turning point, ushering in a new era of accountability, legal discipline, and political transparency? With emotions running high both inside Parliament and on the streets, one reality is undeniable: South Africa is facing a moment unlike any other in its post-apartheid history. Never before has a sitting president confronted such direct and unmistakable pressure from the judiciary. As dawn breaks over a tense and troubled nation, South Africans are confronting a new reality in which legal accountability, political loyalty, and public expectations collide in ways that could redefine the presidency and the nation's future. The events of this night have highlighted both the fragility and the strength of South Africa's democratic institutions, reaffirming that no individual, regardless of office, is beyond the reach of the law, and that justice may finally rise above political allegiance and historical privilege. If you found this valuable, join our community and subscribe.